Hello, everyone. This is Kevin Shipp, your recovering CIA officer, beginning a series, I think a critically important series on reform of the CIA and the steps that are going to be needed to change the corruption and criminality that the CIA has been involved in since its inception. And I've got 10 steps in the book, Twilight of the Shadow Government. And in this presentation, I'm going to get into a little more detail, 13 specific steps that must be done to reform the Central Intelligence Agency. We understand that several employees in the agency have been fired. Most of those were the heads and participants, career people in charge of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the CIA. That's a good thing. That started back in 1994 when I was an officer, and I even wrote an internal article about how damaging it would be. An internal CIA database that set a record for responses, 90% in agreement, and then the deputy director of physical security in the CIA shut the whole website down. That was back in 1994. I was team leader on high risk protective operations. For people that had defected to our country and very intense firearms training, protective operations, etc. And a female was inserted into our course. We were told to include her and get her to qualify. It was an order coming down from the top. She was a good person too. On the line, as we were qualifying to shoot, she couldn't even hit the target with the firearm that we were carrying. And so the instructors, because they were ordered to put her in on this high-risk detail, we all went to lunch and they stayed behind and literally held her hand and helped her hit the target. Um, she told me later, we became friends. She said, I did not want to be on that detail. It was too dangerous. I didn't want to have anything to do with that. But they ordered me to do it for the sake of diversity. Now think about that. A a serious weakness on the part of a protective team for a very important asset to the CIA, whose home country was hunting down to assassinate. And they, because of DEI, they put this lady on the detail um, because it fit their diversity quotas. DEI is a prime example. There are many more. DEI can be deadly in cases like this. If she would have been on that detail, something serious happened. She had to use her firearm. She wouldn't be able to hit anything she was shooting at. And in cases like that, many times they shoot an innocent person. So this is no joke. Also, we understand that DCI Ratcliffe is firing some other employees inside the United States in the interest of efficiency, which I think also is fine. But I have to state here that firing employees inside the CIA is not going to do any good at reforming the illegality of what the CIA is doing and the fundamental roots of its covert operational authority behind the back of Congress many times. So firing people is not going to do any good at all. That is not the reform that is necessary. What I'm proposing, in my view, and I was a 17-year career officer. I served in all four directorates, trained by two of them, actually had positions, and the other two, I know the agency top to bottom, seventh floor down to the file room at stations around the world. And I was involved in all of that. So I know the CIA. I know how it functions. I know how it silences whistleblowers. I know how it conducts criminal operations without Congress's knowledge. I was on the seventh floor as a protective agent for William Casey when he was director of the CIA and witnessed the Iran-Contra affair and the CIA going behind, flagrantly going behind Congress's back to run guns into Nicaragua, which eventually became a drug running operation also. So I've seen it. This is modern times. And of course, now we have Ukraine. John Brennan in secret, along with the Dragon Queen of the Department of State, Victoria Nuland, went into Ukraine in 2014 and helped instigate the coup against the elected leader of Ukraine and replaced him with Zelensky. So that doesn't excuse what Russia has done by any stretch. but it does show the provocation. So this has got to be stopped because none of us voted for this. Not one of us knows where somewhere around 39 billion of our tax dollars go as they go into the dark hole of CI operations Congress is not allowed to see or touch. We, the American people, probably would abhor, and I know I saw this personally, we would abhor some of these operations that the CIA is involved in. So I want to get into these slides. I'm doing slides because I want this to be a matter of record. And I want people to understand that my goal is that the entire American people see each one of these steps. And in the book, Twilight of the Shadow Government, one of the last chapters, last sentence, I say, let the avalanche begin. And that is an avalanche of public demand to the congressmen and senators specifically for critical reform of the CIA. And if you look behind me, you'll see a picture of an avalanche to constantly remind my viewers we all need to join together. If there's millions of us, and if we're voting congressmen and senators out because they're either in the CIA's pocket or afraid to mess with it for the sake of their careers, then we, the people, need to put new people in Congress and the Senate. All right, let's go into step one. Let me phase down here and open up this presentation for you all so that you can see it. Let's start here. I have to be careful about using any version of the CIA logo. That used to be, you couldn't use the CIA logo because of copyright issues. But if you altered the logo a little bit by law, and it was the CIA that trained me in this, by the way, when I was creating a logo for an operation. CIA graphics department told me, no, you just change a little bit of the logo and it's legal as long as it's not the exact logo. Well, CIA pulled a fast one, I find out after doing some research, and they made it illegal for anybody to touch the CIA logo, make a parody out of it, or anything. Welcome to the national security state. So I am using a graphic of the CIA in these slides that is from Shutterstock, and the CIA can't stop it as they tried to stop my posts on at Kevin_Shipp, which I'm still blocked from entering. So CIA reform, the unconstitutional power of government secrecy. Let's get into this. Harry Truman, after he had created the CIA, deeply regretted it because within 2 years, Allen Dulles, the CIA director, had taken it rogue. And it had become essentially a dark, unconstitutional organization. And the CIA, through Dulles, was smuggling Nazi war criminals through Operation Paperclip into the United States, purging their files. One scientist was responsible for killing 60,000 Jews. Dulles modified their paperwork and took all of that out, ran it by Truman, and he approved them to come in not knowing that some of these were war criminals. 2 years in, Harry Truman made this statement in an op-ed in the Washington Post. Quote, there is something about the way the CIA has been functioning that is casting a shadow on our historic position of freedom, and I feel we need to correct it. That was in December 22, 1963, op-ed in the Washington Post, which of course we all know is a mockingbird. The CIA pressured the Washington Post, which it could easily do, and the Washington Post deleted that op-ed 3 days later. Operation Mockingbird, there it is. Okay, let's continue. Now, step one, this is critical. To kill a beast, you got to take its heart out. Permanently end the thing. The roots, the bloody roots of the CIA from the National Security Act of 1947 and the National Security Council Directive 10-2 of 1948 gave the CIA unbridled, unparalleled authority to conduct dark operations, propaganda, assassinations, demolition, controlling economies of other countries, and on and on and on it goes. The CIA was given that power with impunity. That authority and power still remains. It has not been changed. And this is why. It's because we need to repeal and replace the National Security Act of 1947. This is my first and most critical part of CI reform that I think everybody needs to see. Now, you as the American people and my viewers, you're not seeing these things. You're not seeing anybody call for these critical steps, especially in Congress and the Senate. No one, just crickets. And you have to ask yourself why. Talk about that later. Step one, we must repeal and replace the National Security Act of 1947, eliminating the CIA's gross abuse of secrecy. When it was created, the National Security Act of 1947 gave the Central Intelligence Agency the ability to perform intelligence-related duties and functions, and that's good. We need to keep those that the National Security Council directed. We need a good, robust espionage organization to conduct foreign intelligence, which is very important. Plus the other functions the CIA does well. Director of Intelligence, for example, where I was trained as an analyst. So this was the original charter. Problem is it was grossly abused. It was so broadly interpreted that it never has been actually literally given the authority that it has taken to conduct these dark uh, global and even within the United States operations. Blanket covert authority. Government in itself will tend to corruption every time. Secret government will go to tyranny. I have a chapter in my book from the Company of Shadows called The Tyranny of Secrecy and the Power of Secrecy and how it will circumvent the Constitution. I think there's even a verse in the book of Ephesians, which really was my defining moment, where it says, be ashamed to even speak of the things that are done of them in secret, for that which is secret is made manifest by the light. That literally is the verse that prompted me to come out and to stand up as I am doing. Now, National Security Act of 1947 enabled the CIA to perform, and this is critical, enabled the CIA to, quote, perform such other functions and duties related to intelligence affecting the national security as the National Security Council may from time to time direct. No specifics on what the CIA could or could not do. It was wide open. Although intended to establish the Central Intelligence Agency control over collection of clandestine foreign intelligence, which there isn't an agency needs to do, another agency, this language, and I want you all to remember this language was so vague, it was vague enough to authorize other covert operations, psychological, political, paramilitary, assassinations, at the direction supposedly of the NSA, which sometimes doesn't even know what the CIA is doing. This is the wording that the CIA took and interpreted under president after president after president got away with it to conduct unconstitutional, illegal, and criminal operations around the world. That's why this is step one. That's why this is the first thing that needs to be done. Will Congress talk about this? Will Congress push for this? No, they haven't. They've seen the gross abuses and they say nothing. That is why, as behind me the picture shows, this has to be an avalanche by we the people to take intelligence collection and put it back under the United States Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, and a violation of that is a felony. All right. Attempts at covert action oversight gained traction after the exposure of unacknowledged CIA activities through the Church Committee, just the tip of the iceberg. And CIA Director Richard Helms, as soon as MK Ultra came to light in the Church Committee, he immediately ordered the destruction of 10,000 CIA documents so Congress couldn't see them. So if you think, and I hate to say this, but if you think that there are JFK files about the CIA's role in the assassination murder of John F. Kennedy, if you think there are files down in the file room, no, there aren't. They would have destroyed those files just like MK Ultra immediately, and just like Iran-Contra. So I hate to say it, but the smoking gun was done away with long ago. Okay, these trends are supported by the legislative history of 1991 Intelligence Authorization Act and the 2004 Intelligence Reform and Terrorist Prevention Act. Now, reform. They put into place the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence to oversee the CIA to make sure that it didn't engage in any more criminality. Problem is, they're not doing that. I remember when I was in the agency, there was kind of a joke that if you go to the intelligence committees, all of the reports of CI wrongdoing were in a closet piled high, and nobody was looking at them. That was from a witness, fellow officer. But directly, the intelligence communities only meet once a year. That is the least amount that any congressional committee meets. And when they do, it's just a window dressing. And also, let me show you this real quick because I want you all to see this. Um, I would suggest you get a copy of this book, Eyes on Spies. This lady has done a masterful work sorry, probably better if you see it this way. Sorry about that. But this lady does a masterful work on why the intelligence committees are not working. And I would recommend this reading to anybody. And essentially, the fact is, members of the intelligence committee do not want to dig down into the CIA. They just brush it over once a year because the problem is this. They are more concerned with their reelection and promoting their domestic policies than looking into the illegal activities of the CIA. So they brush it over. If they were to come out and demand or reveal some unconstitutional activity of the CIA, they know that their political career would be ruined. Case in point, Frank Church of the Church Committee and Otis Pike of the Pike Report. When they found these atrocities committed by the CIA, Frank Church was threatened directly by the CIA. If you publish this, we're going to come get you. Well, after the report was published, Frank Church, a true hero. There's a book out called The Last Honest Man. I recommend everybody read because I think he was the last honest man in Congress. Sure enough, they destroyed Frank Church's career, and he was not reelected. And the same thing with Otis Pike. They destroyed his career, and he was not reelected either. So Congress on the intelligence committees know that to really investigate the CIA means the end of them politically or worse. So they're not touching it, and essentially they're a sham. And I'll talk in another one of the steps about the congressional intelligence committees, what they don't do and what they should do. There needs to be reform there also. Okay, as I mentioned, I'm going to examine this in a later presentation. Back to step one. The act also authorized the CIA to conduct covert operations such as political, psychological, paramilitary operations at the direction of the NSC. Highlights of the CIA's use of covert action. National Security Directive 4-8. I just want you all to know and see this legislation. December 1947, the Truman administration, NSC, authorized the CIA to conduct covert action operations in peacetime. And the CIA, of course, took that and went wild with it. The NSA made the CIA responsible for psychological warfare and established covert action as an executive branch function. Psychological warfare, in other words, propaganda. Now, we know that the CIA is not just doing gross amounts of propaganda in the foreign field. Look at USAID, how the CIA took hidden funding from USAID and used it for color revolutions and regime change. That's one of the ways, and we talk about one in the book specifically, that the CIA goes around congressional budget restrictions. They find other ways to fund their illegal covert operations. Consider that exposed here. Okay, the NSC made the CIA responsible for psychological warfare and established covert action as an executive branch function. In other words, the CIA can now engage in propaganda, and that includes propaganda within the United States to the American people. I've got a whole lecture on what I call Operation Mockingbird 2.0, where I get into how the CIA engages in propaganda in the news media, Hollywood, papers like the Washington Post and New York Times, to put the CIA, what the CIA wants the people to think in those outlets and publications. In a constitutional government, I don't think so. That egregious violation of the Constitution continues as I speak. And what people forget, and I won't go too deep in this, I have a whole other presentation. After the Church Committee kind of pulled the knickers of the CIA in regards to Operation Mockingbird, George H.W. Bush, of all people, was brought in to address the issue George H.W. Bush being a dark CIA operative going way back to Zapata oil. He claimed that he only had 6 months as the CIA as director. No, no, no. He was a CIA operative for years. So good old George Bush, of all people, comes in to the press conference and makes the statement that the CIA will no longer pay journalists to put information into publications. Then he said this, which everybody missed, or a lot of people missed. He said, quote, from this point forward, it will be voluntary, unquote. So it's still there. It's just voluntary. The CIA has a whole lot of ways to make something voluntary. Quid pro quo is one. Hey, Washington Post, as long as you publish stories we give you or that are positive to the CIA, we'll feed you stories that give you the first take on reporting them. But if you, for a second, criticize the CIA, we will stop giving you any information whatsoever, and we will continue to oppose your publication. And if any of your journalists engage in any sort of investigative journalism on the CIA, their career will be ruined. We're seeing that today, until now, until the advent of the internet and all of these wonderful citizens out there doing podcasts, and revealing this information that heretofore has been blocked. Like, and I hope he sees this, Benny Johnson and his program. I love doing people like Benny Johnson exposing these things, whereas before they never could before. Okay, now let's go on here, and I'm getting a prompt on my screen that I need to change here. Stand by. Yeah, it's adjusting the microphone on its own. Welcome to my world. Let's go back. All right, where are you? There you are. All right. Now, CIA atrocities. And I'm trying to, there we go. All right. I'm sorry, guys. CIA atrocities. Now, these are things the CIA has done under this broad interpretation of such things as the NSC may from time to time direct. CIA has used grossly this vague wording, which I just covered. This is what the CIA has done, and I want everybody to see this, and I want everybody to forward this to their friends and everyone that they know. This is the CIA. 81 interventions in foreign elections, propaganda, funding the opposition, killing of millions of people in those coups. It's estimated the CIA is responsible for the death of 7 million people. That is an abomination. Iraq, from CIA false intelligence, George Tenet, who, by the way, used the state secrets privilege to silence evidentiary cases against the CIA 52 times, more than any other CIA director. Because of CIA false intelligence, 500,000 Iraqi citizens, civilians, were killed. 2,500 American troops were killed. At least 200,000 were injured, either physically or psychologically, because of false intelligence from the CIA doing another attempt at regime change. When is the CIA going to learn? Every time they do this, it results in the death of tens of thousands of people, and it eventually fails. In the case of Iraq, it just opened up the whole arena for Iranian intelligence, and the Iran military to move into Iraq and start conducting operations. Another abysmal failure, but the most disturbing thing, at least for me, is the numbers of deaths of innocent civilians that the CIA has caused. Iran, they staged a coup against the democratically elected government. Mossadegh was his name. Mossadegh, who was a good and beloved leader of Iran. Iran was sitting on a bunch of oil that the U.S. was getting for free. Well, Mossadegh and his administration said, wait a minute, this is Iranian oil. No, we want to nationalize this, as we should, because so it should benefit the Iranian people. Well, that was too much for the CIA and its Wall Street connections. They went in, staged a coup, overthrew the Mossadegh administration, and installed the puppet Shah of Iran, which the people later despised. He was a few cards shy of the intellectual deck and a real materialist. That led to the Iranian Revolution, the installation of Khomeini, and the advent of a radical Islamic government that has Death to America Day once a year and is the chief sponsor of state terror. Thank you again, CIA. Next, and I get a little ruffled about this stuff. Never should have happened. Libya, the CIA staged a third-party assassination of Gaddafi using a CIA terrorist organization under the guise of freedom fighters. And what do you suppose was behind that? Well, Gaddafi had just come out and said he was no longer going to recognize the US dollar, but he was going to start a Middle Eastern currency so that the Middle East could benefit from its own currency, essentially. Well, that was too much for the CIA and Wall Street. So they obviously went into Libya, dethroned Gaddafi, who tried to flee. The CIA gave the so-called terrorists or the so-called freedom fighters the exact position of where Gaddafi was so they could go in and torture and kill him, making it look like the CIA was not involved. Remember plausible deniability? That's what happened in Libya. Do you see any goodness in this at all, or do you see darkness and wickedness? Next, Italy. Some of you know about Operation Gladio, where the CIA left stay-behind units in Italy, and not just Italy, several other countries like Austria and others. Specifically in Italy, because the CIA wanted to overthrow that regime, it left covert paramilitary groups behind after the World War to operate in Italy and stage assassinations, explosions, and other things, and then make it look like it was the leftist movement that did it. Good old CIA staged false terrorist attacks. We should never forget that. Vietnam. Vietnam, as most of my fathers probably know, was started by a false flag event. Because the CIA wanted war in Vietnam, and it meant about $1 trillion to the military-industrial complex connected to the CIA and the MiC wanted a war in Vietnam. So they created one. They staged a false flag event on a ship's radar, U.S. warship's radar, showing Vietnamese vessels moving in to attack a U.S. warship. Only problem, there was nothing on the radar. The CIA doctored the radar, painted in digitally those ships moving in, and then provided that to Congress as a reason to go to war with Vietnam. The CIA, once its dirty claws were in there, 50,000 U.S. soldiers died in a war that never should have happened. And the CIA engaged in what was called Operation Phoenix, which we talk about in Twilight of the Shadow Government. Excuse me. Operation Phoenix, the CIA went out into towns and villages, and any town or village that was suspected of supporting communism, whether it was factual or not, and usually completely unproven, but suspected, kind of like now with the drone kills. They are killing suspected terrorists, and 8 times that suspected terrorist was in a wedding party, and they droned the entire wedding party. Have you heard about that in the papers anywhere? Nope. So the CIA sent paramilitary teams out, knocked on these people's doors, and when they opened the doors, they assassinated them with a special assassination pistol. Usually they killed the father. Many times they killed the father, the mother, and the children. 40,000 innocent citizens were murdered, assassinated by the CIA. Where are the criminal charges? Why aren't these people, many of them are dead now, but why weren't they charged and put in prison for genocide? The power of the CIA over our elected government, as I've talked about in previous lectures and speeches. Indonesia, the overthrow of President Sukarno. President Sukarno was in negotiations with JFK, and they were actually starting to create an allied connection between America and Indonesia. And that was JFK's goal, and that was Sukarno's goal, and Sukarno was pro-American. However, the CIA did not want Sukarno in power. They wanted their own puppet in power. So the CIA staged a coup in Indonesia, overthrew President Sukarno, and resulted in the death of 500,000 innocent Indonesian citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a genocide. Should we reform the CIA with radical reforms? You better believe we should. All right. Contracts with the mafia to run guns to Cuba behind JFK's back. JFK, as many of you know, was involved in talks with Khrushchev. Neither Khrushchev nor JFK wanted nuclear annihilation, and they were working together to get Russia out of Cuba and find some agreement where the United States, Cuba, and Russia could establish diplomatic ties. Well, CIA didn't want that. They wanted Cuba out. And after trying to assassinate him twice, the CIA engaged in contracts with the mafia. Jack Ruby was on one of those contracts, gun running contracts. Does that ring a bell? They engaged in contracts with the mafia to run guns to Cuba behind JFK's back to attack actually to attack Russian ships in Cuba and promote the war. I wish there wasn't more, but there is. Nicaragua, there's an early coup that failed, then a second coup that failed, and then the Iran-Contra arms running, murder, and drug running operation. I was there on the seventh floor on William Casey's detail during Iran-Contra, and the CIA directly went behind Congress's back and supported essentially what was a terrorist group who murdered, caused explosive attacks and other things, and ran drugs openly. The CIA knew about. The CIA engaged in doing that without Congress's knowledge. Several CIA high-level officials were indicted and charged, but they were pardoned and got away with it all. Today, as I mentioned a little earlier, CIA-sponsored coup in Ukraine. Let's remember that this all started at the instigation of the CIA and Department of State Victoria Nuland, who was working with and gave support to George Soros, non-governmental organizations to support the coup as well. Pretty dirty stuff. They violated the Minsk agreement. They violated all agreements with Russia that the United States would never put NATO on Russia's border. This was basically a slap in the face and a prompt of the possibility of having American troops, satellites, weapons on the border of the Soviet Union, which there now is. It doesn't excuse Putin's murderous activities sending young Russians in to die either. But this should not have happened in 2014. It should not have happened. But the CIA never stops the same playbook, everybody. They do these things. They kill tens of thousands of people. The coup completely fails. And then they do it again. Same results. And again, same results. And again, same results. Remember Al-Qaeda? And I know this personally. The CIA trained and funded Al-Qaeda, and Osama bin Laden trained them how to shoot Stinger missiles, trained them how to blow up cars, trained them in surveillance, counter-surveillance, and other things. And when they were done and the Soviets had pulled out, what did Al-Qaeda become? The CIA also was involved in training ISIS. And the CIA, and I have direct knowledge of this, was in charge of training the Free Syrian Army, radical Islamicists that claimed they were moderates to take over Syria. There is no such thing as a moderate Islamic fighter. They all are fighting for a global Islamic caliphate. Look it up. And now we have Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and some of the splinter groups. Ladies and gentlemen, this stuff is an abomination. We need to stop this from happening again. This is what I'm proposing. A National Security Act of 2025. Remove, and this is critical, you have to remove what was the Director of Operations, where I did a tour in. It is now called the National Clandestine Service. Remove it from the CIA. I think we've seen enough of its gross abuses of this broad authority. It's got to be taken away from the CIA. Now, the rest of the CIA that Trump intended should remain. the Director of Intelligence, Director of Administration, the Director of Science and Technology. Those are good, hardworking American patriotic people. About somewhere around 80% of the CIA's employees are good, patriotic Americans just providing for their families. Even as Mike Pompeo said after he went native in the CIA and came out, he said he found that the upper 20% of CIA management does not believe in democracy and they don't believe in the Constitution. Well, I think I just proved that, didn't I? The CIA in the upper levels are sociopathic narcissists who believe that they're at the top of intellectual evolution. They're smarter than everyone else, and their only goal is the protection and the expansion of the CIA's power globally and in the United States. Place the National Clandestine Service into the Defense Intelligence Agency. The DI is already doing the same work. And I know the DIA has been frustrated for years that the CIA is doing the same thing they're doing, and many times the CIA is totally screwing it up. That would be a good place to put it. But if not there, then they need to create an alternate agency. The National Clandestine Service as an alternate agency with strict, underlined strict, congressional oversight. Add wording in the National Security Act of 2025 prohibiting domestic operations against American citizens. Put it under the Constitution. And add wording prohibiting propaganda in the United States. That is a big one because the CIA is affecting the thinking of Americans. That's one of its charters under the National Security Act of 1947 and the National Security Council Directive, Decision Directive 10-2 of 1948. That is why we're seeing the propaganda in the American news media that we're seeing right now. And I can tell you also, one of the CIA's primary propaganda weapons is fear. The CIA wants Americans to fear it. The CIA wants Americans to think that it has this secret, unlimited power that can destroy any American's lives who dare to challenge it. I have a very close friend who was doing a program on politics and faith, and he was getting into many things like Julian Assange, and getting into the Epstein files and other things. And two federal agents showed up at his door and threatened him, told him if he continued with this program, he could be arrested, which completely freaked him out. Now, if I was there, I would have demanded to see their credentials. I would have filmed them, photographed them, and then kicked them off my property. So if that happens to you all, you know what to do. And if you have an attorney, call them and give the phone to the clowns in the suits. But I was about to do an interview with him because we're close friends and we kind of share personal faith and some of the cool things about that. And he told me, he goes, I can't do it. These two men in suits just came and threatened me because I just can't do it anymore. So God bless him. That's not his ministry. His ministry is wonderful. I don't want to mention his name for his sake, but his books are awesome. But it is my calling, whether I like it or not. And it's been made pretty clear to me, plus with several people that I trust, that this is my calling. So, as the saying goes, somebody's got to do it. Anyway, let's move on. Now, create more efficient oversight with the National Clandestine Service. Enough said there. I'll talk about congressional oversight in a later presentation. How are we going to do this? It's up to the executive branch, the President of the United States, and Congress to draft this new National Security Act of 2025. It is up to them. That's where the pressure needs to go, everyone. That's where the avalanche needs to go. Pressure on Congress and the Senate, especially. They have been a blockage to CIA reform for decades. Now, and then President Trump has got to sign it, got to sign that into law, as Truman did. That's critical that the American people put pressure on both of those entities. There's got to be specific wording of the covert authority of this new part of the DIA or the National Clandestine Service and specific restrictions. A must. Critical. That is so important. I can't overestimate it. The President of the United States has got to sign this act into law. Congress has got to draft the legislation implementing the National Security Act of 2025. Uh, the blockage is Congress, ladies and gentlemen, and has been since the CIA's inception. We got to put pressure, big pressure on Congress. There's millions of us, and if there's millions, uh, tens of thousands, even in the districts of these congressmen and senators, there's where we need to demand CI reform, or we vote them out of office. In Washington, as many of you know, I still kind of get nauseated when I go there. In Washington, it's all about money. It's all about reelection. It's all about taking huge donations from Lockheed Martin and other parts of the military industrial complex and the secret intelligence industrial complex, I call it. Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, of course, is part of that. And I have a presentation. I'll talk later about the other secret intelligence industrial complex organizations that have contracts with the CIA and employ thousands of people, many of which are bound by a CIA secrecy agreement. That should send chills up and down our spine. Congress has got to draft a budget, a specific budget for this new center in the DIA, a part of the DIA or the NCS agency. It has to draft a specific budget with a cleared person in the GAO and Congress with full clearances, CI clearances, including compartments, to actually oversee the CIA budget. We wish it would be a line by line budget. Uh, President Reagan used to push for that and push for that and push for that, and the deep state resisted it at every turn, and it never happened. Now, is there a deep state? I've heard people recently say, "No, I don't believe there's a deep state." Is there a shadow government? I don't believe there's shadow government. Ladies and gentlemen, if you watch this presentation or you watch the first presentation I did on the shadow government, I call it the shadow government that manipulates our elected government, Congress, the judiciary, and the President of the United States. And I show how, factually. Yes, there is a shadow government. Yes, there is a deep state, part of which was USAID, conducting CI operations with our tax dollars without Congress's knowledge. So if anybody says, oh, there's no such thing as a deep state, send them to this presentation or send them to my presentation, The Shadow Government, on YouTube. All right. More robust system of congressional oversight has got to be developed with protections put in place for those congressmen and senators, protections of their political career and protections of their personal safety. When the Church Committee was convened, I'm sorry, when the Warren Commission was convened, no, it was the Church Committee, I'm sorry. When the Church Committee was convened, three very important witnesses that were going to testify were murdered the day before their testimony. That's right. They were murdered before they could testify to Congress about the CIA's activities. And I know for a fact, because I've seen them do it, you can be certain that the CI used its secrecy agreement to prevent any CI officers from testifying to either the church or Warren commissions without threat of CIA charging them with criminal penalties and putting them in prison because they signed their secrecy agreement. They tried to weaponize that on me several times. They tried to weaponize that, keeping Twilight of the Shadow government away from the American people. Well, uh, too bad for them because I published it anyway after they sat on it for 3 months, and I knew they were going to redact everything, which is a violation of Executive Order 12356, subparagraph 1.6a, which says the CI cannot redact or black out information simply because it reveals criminal activity or is embarrassing to the CIA. They did that in From the Company of Shadows, my previous book, and I have it on YouTube, and I show it to you exactly that the CIA redacted, blacked out information about the poisoning of my family, the painting of a chemical on our ceiling, us being followed, our house being broken into, and all documented tapes of the CIA trying to block my retirement funds, which is a felony, all of it. They use the secrecy agreement as a weapon, and that's not what it was created to do. I will address that in one of the later steps. Okay. Got to motivate Congress, and you motivate them most with whether they're going to be sitting in that chair next time around or not. Now, as I wrap up, I want to stress, I think John Ratcliffe is a good choice for the job. He was um, director of national security for 6 months. He held a seat in Congress for 5 years. He was the only intelligence official that stood up and called out the Russia collusion hoax as false information. The only one. So I think those are good reasons, but I hope he understands what he's coming up against. There is a CIA bureaucracy below the DCI that does what it wants when it wants to and keeps the DCI out of the loop. You can count on the fact that this monster, the CIA, will do everything it can to stonewall John Ratcliffe and any CIA reforms. You can count on it. That's why I'm demanding repeal of the National Security Act of 1947 and the drafting of a new one. There will be bureaucratic stonewalling to stop Ratcliffe and any real reforms in the CIA. Count on it. Here's an example. The CIA's covert bureaucratic control. William Casey, George H.W. Bush, and Iran-Contra affair. William Casey was the DCI. He broke the law, a felony. He was going to be charged and sent to prison until he had a seizure with a brain tumor, which happened. I was there. I saw the CAT scans. And then George H.W. Bush, who was a longtime CIA officer for decades, was installed first as the vice president. That's a CIA in the White House, and then actually as president of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, that's how the system works. That's how the deep state works. That's how the shadow government works. The CIA put its own man as the president of the United States. Just think about that for a few seconds. Okay, John Brennan. John Brennan originally was the executive officer in the CIA. He pushed Russiagate. He took unvetted information, false information, called it intelligence, and then leaked it to the press. You know, leaking to the press where other officers get arrested and put in prison. Leaked it to the press as if it was real CIA intelligence. He actually broke into the Senate computers to look at the torture report and what they were finding. And of course, good old Johnny, former communist in his earlier years, how he got by his polygraph test, whatever. Anyway, good old Johnny was part of the 2014 Ukrainian coup, placing us once again, as the CIA did with JFK, on the verge, possibility of nuclear war and nuclear annihilation. CIA never learns. It does the same thing over and over and over. Mike Pompeo, Gina Haspel, known as Bloody Gina inside the CIA because she ran the torture program. Gina Haspel and John Brennan went behind DCI Pompeo's back to do all of this and engage in these torture operations, which, by the way, were more than just waterboarding. You know, the good old CIA cutout routine. You don't torture them yourselves badly, beatings and killings. No, you turn them over to a allied foreign service like Pakistan or something, and you let them torture them with their methods, which is exactly what happened. So Haspel and Brennan went around Mike Pompeo completely. We're going to see that happen. They're going to try to do that with John Ratcliffe. So heads up. Gina Haspel actually helped, I think she was stationed in London, actually helped create, he was either London or France, I think it was London. She was the chief of station, helped create the Steele dossier full of false information as she was being told and manipulated by her mentor, John Brennan. Gina Haspel, when Congress subpoenaed the CIA and Gina Haspel to turn over existing torture videotapes, Gina Haspel destroyed all 10 of these subpoenaed torture videotapes. All 10. Was she ever held accountable for that? Was she ever charged for that? Was she ever brought before Congress or a congressional subpoenaed committee for that? No. No, she's probably toasting her toes in the sun by her pool somewhere in the United States or elsewhere. Bloody Gina. But she got away with this without the top of the CIA having anything to do with it or being involved in it. These people in this bureaucracy, like Haspel and Brennan, are continuing the CIA's gross abuse of power and operations, even without the knowledge of the director of the CIA. Mike Pompeo, sadly, went native when he got in the CIA. They're good. They're good at how they sway DCIs. They're good at how they sway Congress. They're good at how they sway the president. Remember, they're masters of propaganda. I was in there. I know exactly what I'm talking about. And they have ways to convince you that if you don't do this, then you're committing treason, or you personally are hurting national security when you could be a real patriot and help us defend national security. That's how they do it. They did it with Sean Hannity, who wound up wearing a CIA lapel pin on Fox News as he gave his brief. Please, people, open your eyes. So they will go around, the bureaucracy will go around the director of the CIA. Deputy Director of the CIA, Mike Morrell, a rabid Hillary Clinton supporter, was part of the 42 senior CIA officials that signed the statement that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, and then later that Trump is a threat to national security. You don't think that the shadow government CIA manipulates our elected government? I got whole presentations on this. They do. The director of operations, the person that sits on top of the DO, or now the National Clandestine Service. I interacted with the director of operations on a case, counterintelligence case. That's a whole other story, where the agency and the FBI blew it on a big case, big time. And because they were so embarrassed, I was a counterintelligence special investigation unit officer. They sent me to apologize to the director of operations for the counterintelligence center counterespionage group screw up. Cowards, dishonest. All right. At the beginning, the very beginning, again, this is the bloody roots of the CIA, which produced poisonous fruit and still does today. Alan Dulles went around the director of CIA, John McCone, and engaged in several covert operations, like the Bay of Pigs, without McCone, the DCI, even knowing about it. JFK, I mentioned this earlier. Alan Dulles staged attacks on Soviet ships in Cuba and was behind running guns to Cuba, of which Jack Ruby was part, and more on him in a later presentation. But once again, going around the DCI, the CIA bureaucracy is a monster, and the only way you kill a monster is by taking its heart out and taking this blanket covert authority away from it. Okay, and I talked about how Dulles smuggled in Nazi war criminals, doctored their files and gave them to Truman so they could bring him into NASA for rocket technology and other things. Truth is stranger than fiction, everyone. My conclusion, and I want us all never forget this. Never fear the CIA. That is their primary weapon, just like the devil himself. That's his primary weapon. Do not fear the CIA. They cannot touch millions of us. Now, I'm put myself out there kind of as like the lamb at a gyro feast. This is what I think God has called me to do. Otherwise, I would not be doing this. Obviously, my personal safety is in danger, and the CIA may come out and try to take all the royalties from me for the book Twilight of the Shadow Government. So this has to be done. The time is now. When people fear their government, there's tyranny. What have we seen in the last 4 years? However, when the government fears the people, there is liberty. Welcome, everyone, to the American Revolution, the new American Revolution. Reform of the national security state, reform of congressional oversight, and constitutional rule of the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA. We can do it. We, the people, have done some remarkable things in America and in this government in the past. And if we join together by the millions, we will do it. Stick with me in prayer. Stick with me in sending this video to everyone you know. I do these videos for free because I believe that's what I'm supposed to do. So I don't make any money off them. I put them out in public. Feel free to reproduce them and send them to other people. And please like and subscribe to this channel. The more people we get on this channel, the more powerful we become. So like and subscribe, bring your friends in to watch these things. The next 12 steps are going to be pretty eye-opening. Repeal the National Security Council Directive 10.2. Now, this will be step 2 in my next presentation. We need to repeal the National Security Council Directive 10.2 in 1948. Excuse me. Allergies are really rough down here. Somewhere in the southeastern United States. Pine pollen. Ugh. Anyway, I'm going to be talking about this as step 2, the repeal of the National Security Council Directive 10.2 of 1948, and the elimination of the CIA's power of plausible deniability and its blanket so-called authority to conduct wide open covert operations. So that'll be step 2. I'll get into how we're going to repeal that and what needs to be put in its place. All right, got it. We have to eliminate this unbridled and unaccountable CIA power of secrecy. They have used the power of secrecy against me so many times, threatened me so many times, threatened my attorney so many times, and they've gotten away with it. They settled with our family because we were poisoned in a house they put us in that they knew was contaminated. Settled, a judge forced the agency to a court-ordered mediated settlement. I presented my evidence there, and I remember the security officer across the table. His jaw dropped. I knew it. He was on Casey's detail with me. His jaw dropped when he heard the evidence. We wound up settling with the CIA, and the CIA OGC signed all the paperwork. We'd lost all our personal property. We had $10,000 in medical bills. The pressure on our family was incredible. My wife and son were having to see a psychiatrist for PTSD. A week later, we thought, well, at least they settled. At least it's over. Week later, my attorney calls me and says, "You're not going to believe this, Kevin." I said, "What, Clint?" He said, "The CIA has contacted me. Uh, the DI on behalf of the CIA has contacted me. The guy's name, DOJ, was Glenn McTaggart. This will be Glenn McTaggart's legacy." McTaggart sent a letter, of which I have a copy, to my attorney stating that if Mr. Shipp does not accept a lower settlement than the one they signed, if Mr. Shipp and his family do not accept a lower settlement, then we are going to invoke the state's secret privilege and seal all the evidence. To which I told Clint to tell Mr. McTaggart, we don't get blackmailed. You're not going to blackmail us. You signed a settlement agreement, legally, a legal agreement, and you need to abide by it. Within no more than 2 weeks, the CIA invoked the state's secret privilege, George Tenet, sealed our case, sealed all my evidence, and threatened all of us, including my kids, with prison if we talked about the evidence of our case with anyone. So I have witnessed the unbridled power of this monster personally. All righty. How do you get in touch with me? Well, I have an X account, X at Kevin_Shipp. I think we got about 123,000 or so followers on there, and I brief everyone and give updates on government reform, CI infractions, and important things that the American people need to know. I just posted these 13 steps so everybody could see them, and initially they were frozen and deleted completely from my X page, and I understand now that they're back up on at Kevin_Shipp. You can go see them. However, I'm blocked from any additional posts on this X account. So we'll see how that works out. You can go to patreon.com/Kevin-Shipp, and that's where I put all the personal stuff. I have tape recordings of the official stating that the CIA had blocked my thrift savings plan retirement funds, a felony. I've got things like that on there. A lot of other stuff that I only give to Patreon sponsors, and some of it even personal videos and things. So I recommend you go there. The Publication Classification Review Board, or PCRB, has already sent me an email saying they consider that I have violated my CIA secrecy agreement, or they call it an NDA now because it sounds a little less sinister. I knew that was coming. I was ready for that. I still am ready for that. They will probably as they have done in other cases, uh, take the royalties, all my royalties from the Company of Shadows, which has been a bestseller, and that's fine. That's not why I wrote it. So we'll see what happens there. My lovely wife, Sue, and best buddy has set up a GoFundMe page to counter that. And there it is right there for you to see. She's trying to help where she can because we may not make a dime off this book. But that's not why I'm taking the risk. You can email me at Ascent LLC and make sure you spell that correctly because it's a toughie. ASCENT LLC at gmail.com. That's the email address of the publishing company I formed to get in from my first book, second book. To get my second book out into the public, I formed my own publishing company because the CI was blocking everything I tried to send them. And I won't mention their names, but major publishers were saying, we took a look at your story. My gosh, this is incredible. But we took it before the board, and the board doesn't want to cross the CIA. Saw that over and over and over. So I formed my own publishing company called Ascent Publishing, LLC. And I wrote, edited, cover designed, everything with from the Company of Shadows. And I got From the Company of Shadows out and published through Lightning Source. And in From the Company of Shadows, I built in a code showing what the CIA used to seal all our evidence. And it's pretty humorous. The code is in the epilogue if you ever want to search for it. But anyway, if you want to send a note to me, that would be the place to do it. The Twilight of the Shadow Government, How Transparency Will Kill the Deep State is available on Amazon still. It was sold out. It has been restocked, and so it's back there. And you can get the book there. I promise you, you will like it because I wrote things in there that the CIA couldn't touch. So it's getting very good reviews. So you guys, that's step one. Step two is coming, and I'm going to keep at this until we see real reform of the CIA. I appreciate you guys more than you know. Subscribe to this channel, click the like button, send it to as many people as you can. Subscribe to this channel. I want everyone to see these steps to CIA reform. You all are patriots. You're good people. You're America's best. And that's why I post these. I believe in you. I believe in your faith. I believe in your courage. And I believe in your love for this country and the Constitution. So we will see you next time when I come in and we do step two.